Forget banning the Chinese. If Ron DeSantis wants to help out affordability and real estate in the Florida area, he needs to ban New Yorkers and people from Chicago. I'm absolutely kidding. But the reality is, every time I make a video with a crazy thumbnail that says the Florida market's crashing, I get a list of comments from people saying, hey, our marketplace is never going to crash, and the reason why is because so many people are flocking here. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is you're hovering over the target as to why there's an affordability crisis in Florida. But the bad news is your assumption that people flocking into Florida and heavy southern migration to this particular state is going to last forever, based on data, is completely flawed and likely coming to an end right now in real time. I want to bring clarity to this issue because right now more than ever, there has been all kinds of enemies of affordability all at the same time. People oftentimes can't figure out where the major pressure is coming from. Where homeowners and homeowner associations in Florida are being met with bills that are 2 to 4 times higher than recent years. So on today's video, I'm going to prove to you 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to prove to you that inbound migration to Florida is the paramount number 1 issue that has absolutely pushed affordability out of reach. Number 2, I'm going to show you exactly where our inbound migration is coming from. And thirdly, I'm going to tell you why I believe 2023 is the major year that Florida migration goes in the opposite direction. But if you're with me and you think lack of affordability is a major issue, smash the thumbs up below and let's get into the data. This is one of the most fascinating tools on the internet to show you how money is moving around the US from a migration standpoint. Let me go through town by town and show you just the 4 major markets: Jax, Tampa, Miami. We're going to make this really fast, but let's establish who's moving. Look at Miami. All the top counties are from New York County, which is New York, Fairfield County, Cook County, which is Chicago again, Queens County, Kings County, New York. So then you come over here to Pinellas County. So we're in Tampa now. Tampa is inbounding from Chicago. They're inbounding from New York City. And the 5th highest inbounds to Page County, which is also suburb metro area of Chicago. Again, they export all their residents to Pasco, Manatee, Hernando, so on and so forth. Now we're looking at Jacksonville, which is Duval County. You can see the top driver, Fairfield County, Connecticut, shows up again. You have Miami-Dade, Broward County, Alachua, and then Loudoun County, Virginia. All right, folks, the next thing that I want to prove to you is how much migration has absolutely driven up prices throughout these metro areas in Orlando. What you have in front of you is called a home price to earnings ratio chart. Okay, so I'm going to read the bottom of the graph so you can see the legend. This ratio is price to earnings. This compares the typical home value from Zillow to the annual wages of an actual worker in that location. So for instance, you have right here, you have Jacksonville, which hovered around a 4.5x home price to earnings ratio, has now jumped all the way to 6.4, which is actually higher than it was the last time the market shifted. The idea around PE ratio is it shows how much home prices need to decline for the entire marketplace to find its normal long run equilibrium. Markets have highs, markets have lows, they have equilibrium. How far off equilibrium is the marketplace? Orlando went from 5.1 to 7.5. According to data, a 30% adjustment in home prices is needed to bring it back to equilibrium. Tampa is nearly 35% over the mark from its natural market equilibrium. In Miami, taking the most out of area pressure of any other marketplace in Florida, and Miami is the absolute pinnacle of outside the state inbound migration, is 35.3% off the mark from where it needs to be. Now, folks, let's take a look at Chicago. The ratio down the line is 4.2x. It's currently at 4.8. For this market to return to homeostasis as it is, it's only a difference of 12.5%. New York as well, not so far off the line. It's a 7.4x PE ratio. It's corrected to 9. Prices there to bring it back to equilibrium, only 17.1%. Now back to my promise to prove to you that this pressure is coming from outside the area. Look at Miami right now. Average cost to own a home, $2,926. According to ZipRecruiter, the upper end range for salary in Miami, which is 75th percentile by the way, is $68,604. Okay, so if you're an average worker local in Miami and you're making the upper end of the range, if you borrow near the max amount you can qualify for a home, you'd qualify for a payment of $2,286. I'm sure that doesn't buy much when the average cost of ownership is $2,926, almost $700 more. The other thing you got to figure, folks, is I ran that math, maxing out your mortgage qualifications to get to $2,300 a month. But that's also assuming the person who's applying for the mortgage has no car payment, no credit cards, or any other debt already weighed against them on a monthly basis. And folks, this isn't good. If you look at the graph here in Miami, you can see where housing typically needs to be. You can see right here that folks are typically forced into renting, not by choice. Look at the lower line. It's always been much cheaper in Miami to own. So if you had the opportunity, you want to buy. And that's where the line needs to be. The ownership line needs to be below. But in all the Florida markets, I'll show you this, folks, rent and ownership is tighter in this market than anywhere else in the state. Most of the time, it is way more expensive to own, but rents are still well below the ownership line. Ownership for sure is a premium, but rents are a much wider gap. The reason why in Miami these two lines are tight together is because so many people are moving in that they're willing to pay top dollar to rent or top dollar to own, any options on the table, and that's ultimately where some of the highest out-of-state earners are moving to right now and driving those two lines close together. So even rent doesn't actually show a premium, which is the case in Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa, where the rent line falls well below. And the rent line, folks, listen, the reason why Tampa, Jax, and Orlando, the rent line's so far down is because those are the locals getting what they can qualify for on their meager incomes, because that price to earnings ratio to own is so stinking out of control. And my entire thesis that I'm telling you, folks, is if the migration from outside of this state ever dwindles, it slows down, you are going to have inventory hit and you are going to have prices fall because the cost of ownership has to come down much closer and below the rental cost that we currently see throughout the state in order for the locals to come back and engage the market and buy from sellers. Now, while for many of you, I didn't need to prove that Northerners are driving up home prices, but to be thorough, I thought I would. Next, I'm going to jump into something that's way less Captain Obvious and more likely to surprise you, is that one of the main reasons why out-of-staters are moving here that is now fading is called geographic arbitrage. Back in 2020, this article, particularly from August of 2020, talked about how geographic arbitrage could make you money. It really sold the Northerners on the notion of, hey, look, you can sell this really expensive $1 million townhouse, you can move down south to Florida, and you could buy an estate home at a bargain price. But folks, those bargains aren't bargains anymore. And you aren't going to believe it, but I'm going to show you there's actually no upside from moving to New York to Miami right now. One of the key points of data I want to prove to you that this whole geographic arbitrage is gone out the window is because I want to make sure we actually compare value to value. Because here's the deal. You could leave a state in New York and prices might be higher in Florida, but you might get a much bigger house for the money. That will be people's complaints from one expensive city like New York or Chicago that's been much, much higher priced than the South. They say, well, we were already really, really expensive. It already cost you a lot more before the pandemic happened to get such a small place. So there's always this value transition. Well, one of the things we're going to look at right here to put all of that to rest is we're actually going to look at what the dollar per foot costs in Florida compared to New York, compared to Chicago. And the results are going to blow your mind. Down here on the red line, you're going to see where my cursor is located, $312 per square foot, August of 2020. Today, it's $404. For sake of time, I'm just going to tell you right here, when New York was at $313, Miami was at $228, which was a difference of 36%. Now, folks, that gap is less than 15%. In reality, if you're going to leave New York right now, come to Florida and live in Miami, you're more than likely looking at what do I leave in New York to rent in Miami. Well, folks, I just showed you in Miami, it's nearly $3,000 to rent a property in Miami. And right now in New York, it's $3,156. There's not a leading reason to leave New York to save money and live in Miami. And folks, the idea of buying in Florida is ridiculously difficult, but renting is now just as bad. So how heavy is migration going to be when I'm coming to Florida to live somewhere else, deal with the hassle of getting there, and I'm not even saving money over New York City? Now, I proved to you earlier that Chicago was the top migrator into Tampa. Check this out. Chicago's rents right now, $1,936 a month, In Tampa, you're going for a going rent of $2,098, and ownership is not much better. Chicagoans leaving Chicago to come to Tampa at the beginning of the pandemic, the whole geographic arbitrage was a reality. You actually saved money coming to Florida and moving to Tampa from Chicago. Square footage in Tampa is now 14% higher cost than Chicago, which explains a whole lot. I didn't know Tampa was actually leading Chicago in cost. Explains a lot when I get someone from Chicago on the phone. They start saying, I want to buy this kind of house and that kind of house. How much does it cost? And I tell them, and they're kind of in shock. So folks, Florida being the geographic arbitrage darling, where you can kind of leave your small spot and get the bigger one, I just showed you. There's not a massive gain on dollar per foot, and there surely isn't on renting. Renting here is no more of a savings than just staying where people are right now, which is why I'm saying this is a keystone issue with people no longer desiring to be here. Folks, the next big reason that this is all going to transition, remote working is on the decline. Look at this. This is a recent press release from U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. In the last month, businesses surveyed this year, 72.5% of businesses had little or no telework compared to 60% a year prior. The other thing that you're going to see happen, folks, as the Fed raises rates and loosens employment, creates more layoffs, puts more strength in the hands of the employer, they're going to do away with remote working. You're hearing it more in the headlines that the employers do not want remote work. The employees, yes, they want remote work. Employees in the news and on TikTok say, I will quit if I'm forced to remote work. Well, you won't have to. Look at this. Forbes in a list of layoff updates, April 27th. Rideshare company Lyft unveils plan to slash nearly 1,100 positions in a security exchange filing. Look at this headline in the week that followed. Lyft employees told to return to office as new CEO lays out vision. Folks, this isn't the only company doing it. Headline after headline, top line employers have said this remote working is coming to an end. You couple that with all the issues going on in the commercial sector where these empty office spaces are actually causing a problem, and someone's got to pay for it. For whatever it's worth, Florida was one of the top destination states for people that wanted to remote work and wanted to move here while making a high salary from somewhere else, and that is clearly maybe not coming to a complete end, but diminishing greatly in real time. Closing points I'll make as I wrap up. I already did a recent video about Redfin data showing the fact that second home purchasing, Airbnb, short-term rental type purchases are way down because of all the financial headwinds and ability to get those kinds of mortgages right now. But you couple that with one of the major factors of why people were moving to Florida, that's the political environment around the pandemic. And while that is a keystone issue that drove a lot of people to our state, the challenge of moving here, just not so much easier anymore. All that to say this, I think locals can expect the rents to ease up very soon. They're not going to plummet, but they're going to correct a bit. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think record migration in the face of this data remains forever at record pace for Florida? The massive inbound flocking at the face of the difficulty, the lack of savings to move to these cities is going to have the same allure to drive people in at record numbers? But that's it for today. I'm grateful as always you're watching the channel, and we'll see you on the next one.